Everyone, hope you can hear me clearly. So welcome to the Education, Sport and Children's Services Committee, which has been conducted from the Chamber and remotely through Microsoft Teams platform. Could you please ensure your microphones and cameras are off? And before we begin, I will ask the Reverend Ian McRitchie to lead us in prayer. The meeting is now being recorded.
Let's join together in prayer. Lord, our God, we come. We give thanks this day for all of your goodness to us. We acknowledge that you are a great God and a great King. You're the one who is providing for us each and every day. And as we reflect upon the world that we find ourselves in, a world that so often is characterized by turmoil and pain and anguish and even fear, we give thanks, O Lord, that in and through the Lord Jesus Christ, that has been opened up for us that new and that living way. And as we gather together here today, we pray your hand to be upon this meeting, that we would be united together with unity of purpose, that we would be granted that wisdom from yourself, that indeed we would be found working together for the good of the young of our community. We pray that you would lead us and guide us, grant us to discuss one with another with respect and integrity, that indeed your Holy Spirit might even be pleased to lead us at this time. Go with us now, we pray, and forgive us for Jesus' sake. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend McRitchie. Okay, you'll all be well versed in the conduct of the meeting, but just a couple of points to assist the process. If you're a member of the committee attending remotely, please leave your camera on and your microphone off. Could officers please leave both off unless you're called to speak to a report or to answer a question? And a reminder to those members in the chamber of the queuing system. If you wish to ask a question, please leave your mic on in case you wish to come back on the response. Committee members will be given priority. In regard to declarations of interest, members must leave the chamber or end the call remotely. Finally, a reminder that the meeting is being live streamed and recorded. The recording will be made available on the Comhairle's website following the meeting. Item 4 will be taken in private at the end of the meeting, and prior to moving into private, participants other than the relevant officer and members of the committee will be asked to leave the meeting. Before we start the committee proper, I'll just go through some good news stories. And the first one is Tony Wade and Kirsty. They were nominated for Cancer Research UK Flame of Hope Awards in relation to the Women's Cancer Challenge 5K, which has been organised since 2007. So well done for that. Annalene Ingram, Bikeability Scotland Awards 2021 Instructor of the Year in recognition of her efforts to place cycling and outdoor activities at the heart of the school year. Dalbras Primary School, successful partnership working between the local community, school staff, outdoor learning managers, with support from other Comhairle departments to develop opportunities for pupils to engage in outdoor activities around the school. Sailing, kayaking and mountain biking and orienteering are among the activities provided, with the programme being recognised during a recent HMIE thematic inspection as an example of how outdoor learning should be integrated into schools. And I was fortunate enough to be asked to attend the inspection as a parent, and the inspector was extremely impressed. In fact, he was asking if he could get a job in the school, which was always good to hear. A number of our young footballers are progressing well with Premiership clubs. We've got Katrina O'Carroll with Celtic under-17, Rachel Johnson, Celtic and Scotland under-19, Chloe Nicholson, Rangers on loan to Hamilton, James Graham, who's at Rangers under-18, Matthew Wright, Ross County, who's loaned to Brora and top scorer in the Highland League, Adam McKinnon, Ross County, also loaned to Brora. And all of the above, previously mentioned, have been supported athletes through the CNAS Performance Development Programme. We have Abby Stewart, 2 firsts in the Under-15 North District Cross Country League. Amy Ringstead, selected for North Region Basketball Squad and Scotland Under-17 Trials. Cara Hanlon, adding to her success over the years, 100 metre and 50 metre breaststroke at the recent British Unis Short Course Championship, plus silver in the 200 metre breaststroke. Christina McKenzie, confirmed as the record holder for the quickest time for a woman to cycle from Land's End to John O'Groats. I believe it was 839 miles in 51 hours and 27 seconds. The dream is now a reality, was the quote. Christina also raised over £13,000 for Alzheimer's Scotland, and her efforts were recognised at a reception hosted by the convener last month. Oog Primary School, in November, pupils found out that their climate justice idea of using turbines in wastewater pipes to generate electricity had been highly commended in a national climate change Dragon's Den competition. And in relation to COP26 and climate change, a number of our schools, especially the primary schools, did a lot of work in relation to climate change, and there was numerous videos that they produced, and I will share them all with you after committee, so don't feel like I'm spamming you when you hear lots of video links later on. Finally, Stornoway Primary School, the primary 6 pupils are part of the Climate Ready Classroom project. The project was launched in Tianjin, China, and P6 were invited to attend virtually with their partner school. During the discussions, they talked about the importance of bees for the environment, the impact of food miles on the environment, and how we use our environment for health and well-being. Tianjin pupils talked about ways in which the internet can help protect the environment, a healthy lifestyle, low carbon life, and green travel. And I hope I pronounced Tianjin right. Okay, so item 1 is the minute of meeting 21st September 2021, and that's for approval. Okay, approved. Item 2 is declaration of interest. The members are asked to declare any interest they have on any agenda items. And it would be helpful if members expressed why they're declaring an interest in the item concerned. Members in the chamber, please do so now by pressing your microphone or through remotely through Teams by raising your hand function. And please ensure the declaration is repeated prior to the relevant item and you adhere to protocol as previously indicated. Do we have any declarations at the moment? No. Okay. Item 3. This report provides an overview of the Education, Skills and Children's Services Department business plan progress and related performance for the second quarter of 2021-22. The Director for Education, Skills and Children's Services is available to speak to the report and answer any questions. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few brief points for me on the report as it stands. The usual detail is within the report, but I'll just draw your attention to a few of the points in the report. At 6.5, it's good to see that fostering placement will be available and used, as well as in the other islands with, I think, 2 new families coming on board. So thank to the fostering and adoption team for their work in doing that. And I think also we're able to provide more respite care and used, which is also good. At 6.8, we've been successful, or the librarian has been successful in getting some extra funding to enable Stornoway Library to open for slightly longer hours. So that's a welcome thing. And at 6.11, the Gaelic Action Plan, we continue to develop that and we'll work more closely across the Comhairle to ensure that the Gaelic Plan is a workable document and a working document for staff across the department. And as we noted at the previous meeting, in terms of performance and CFE levels, performance had gone down and this was to be expected with the COVID impact. So as part of the recovery programme, Donald and Mary Claire are leading on assessment basically in literacy, numeracy, and in the senior phase we're looking at things. So there's a lot of detail there in 6, 16, 17 and 18 to be looked at in terms of the work we're doing at the moment, and we'll report on that at future meetings when we see what the success is and we'll see what the structure is. We're still uncertain with absences, etc. At the moment we're looking at a full exam diet, but we'll see how that transpires over the next few months. So I'm happy to take any questions on other points that people wish to raise.
Thanks, William. Any questions? Comments from councillors? Councillor Cal McLean.
Thanks, Chair. Can I ask the Director a number of questions related to number 6 there, 616, and there's one of the bullet points, and there's a reference to the 618 bullet point 3 as well, as to a QAMSO, 10 new quality assurance and moderation officers. Could you clarify?
Yes,
you say when you appoint, you know why I'm.
Yeah, I do understand. These are teaching staff, and Donald can come in and or Mary Claire as well. I know she's on the link. These are teaching staff. We train them to have the specialism in assessment and moderation, and they then work with staff in their own cluster of schools to ensure that everybody's working to the same level so we can get consistency in terms of assessment and moderation. So I do understand the question you're asking. QAMSOS is one of these new terms in education that are relatively new. It's been around for a while. Do you want to come in, Donald?
Yeah, I was just going to clarify again, these are not additional positions or positions that have any kind of financial implications. It's a national programme of training operated by Education Scotland and all 32 authorities, where the 32 councils appoint, designate, maybe a better word, practicing teaching staff for additional training from Education Scotland to make them quality assurance and moderation support officers. And then, as the director has explained, they support colleagues through that moderation process for the achievement of a level in curriculum for excellence. So it's more of a training programme than additional posts. So we've had for a number of years 3 trained staff, but Education Scotland were funding the training of additional staff members to strengthen the support for teacher judgment and CFE, and we've been able to access training for an additional 10 staff to do that across primary and secondary, across all island areas.
Thanks, Director. I thought you had an overabundance of money when there was an extra 10 posts being. The other one is in 616 again. I can't remember what is it, bullet point 5. There is a reference to Education Scotland Attainment Advisor. Can you explain what this is? Is this an individual? Or?
It is an individual, and again, Donald and Mary Clare work very closely. Each local authority has an education attainment advisor, and that's been on the go now for some 5 years at least, the attainment advisors. And they work closely with schools where there's a particular need in a school, or they work with clusters of schools. They support all schools just in their work. I think there's been a potted history of attainment advisors. I think, again, Donald Mary Clare's, we're on about their 4th or 5th. Some have been excellent, some not so excellent. The one we've got just now is hugely supportive and works really well with Donald and Mary Clare. And I think he's got a focus 2 days a week that he works with us. He's based in Glasgow. He travels quite a lot at Education Scotland's expense, but he does come up and visit the schools and works quite closely with them. But I think in the terms of education reform, the impact of education of these attainment advisors will be looked at nationally to see if government and Education Scotland, if they think they're getting value for money.
Yes, I was under the misapprehension that Education Scotland has taken over the role of director or extra director, but I'm glad to say that you're working with him rather than he's working with you. The other one is you mentioned in 618. I'm sorry for taking over here, but just to is bullet point 5. There is refocusing of PEF of pupil equity fund. Can you give any?
Again, we're moving to the Scottish Attainment Challenge 2, as it were, and the money's being redistributed because in the previous iteration there was the 7 challenge authority that looked as if they were getting the vast majority of the money. Now it's being distributed more equitably, I think, and it'll give us a chance to work again with schools to look at the children and young people. One of the challenges we've got was the Pupil Equity Fund, that it's measured in terms of free school meals, and we keep asking families to apply for the free school meals because I think there's a reluctance in island communities to be singled out, to be seen as somebody who might need a free school meal, but it helps us the more that apply, and we've definitely got very small numbers in some schools, and we think there should be more. So our money, I think it was 130,000 or thereabouts last year we received. So we've been working with apprentices, etc., supporting the children in school. So again, Donald and Mary Clare are leading the teams, working with the executive heads, looking at what precisely we need to do under the new Scottish Attainment Challenge, Scottish Attainment Challenge 2, or whatever it's called. I don't know if Donald and Mary Clare wish to add.
Could you put your mic off just now?
Yeah, it would just again, it's a bit further clarification of that. There were 2 threads to the to that refocusing that's mentioned in that report. The first, as the director has pointed out, is to do with the development of the next generation of the Scottish Attainment Challenge, which will hopefully draw some significant additional funding to us. As the director has pointed out, the Pupil Equity Fund will continue to be administered based on a formula involving free school meal allocation, but we're expecting it will also bring in an additional element linked to the redistribution of the funds that were going to the 7 challenge authorities in the Central Belt of Scotland, so that all 32 authorities benefit from that following an Audit Scotland evaluation of that project. That allocation that will be additional to us is going to be based on the national measures for children in low-income families. So that's going to bring a different dynamic to it as well, and hopefully bring us some additional funding. So that will require us to refocus the efforts of that team. But in addition to that as well, we're recognising very much that we've got a changing demographic in our community. We've had recent reports in press locally of increased rates of poverty across our islands, particular challenges around family employment and rurality issues through COVID-19 and so on. And we're working with that pool of staff to make sure that they are as dynamic and responsive to the changing needs of our school population, to make sure that children whose circumstances shift and change during these few years also get recognised in that programme. So these are the two areas for refocusing.
Thanks. Finally, and this is from an illiterate financier person. It's to do with 8.1. Can I ask again, what is, I notice Head of Education early years, and the total budget is 2764, and then there's a minus 775. There. What does that mean? Does that mean you've already overspent, but yet you're still going to come to a target of 2764? Can we clarify that minus, please? Maybe William, you're on that.
I'm not going to answer this one. I'll ask my finance colleagues in Gordon Smith or Norman to come in to explain it. They'll do it more clearly than I can.
Yep.
Hi. The minus is actually a real minus, 775. Early years is, as you know, in the middle of the expansion, and the Scottish Government gave us, I think, around about £3.7 million for the expansion. And to date, I think we're up to around about 2.6 or 2.7. So there is an underspend of 600,000 that's still sitting there to be used on the expansion. So we're going to keep spending that, and that will carry forward until it's used up as we expand to the full service. So the outturn will be the budget. Carry forward until it's all used up. So it's been slowly used up as we expand.
So it's really from it's over a carry forward from years one, and now you're still going to get to the outturn at the year of 2764. You'll break even.
Yes,
that's right. It's as easy as that.
Thanks, Cal. Councillor John Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. John Mitchell, Harrison, South Lochs. Just like to thank the Director for his report. And maybe I've missed something, but I see that in 6.8 it talks about the library service doing the digitisation of the newspaper, which is an excellent idea. Could I just ask about the report that I think Kathleen Milne is undertaking with regard to the library service? Obviously, I have a vested interest in the continuation in the medium and longer term for the library provision in Tarbert. Am I right in assuming it will be coming up at the next series of meetings, Mr. McDonald?
I sincerely hope so. It's just, I think with staffing issues in the library, it's been challenging, and Kathleen's working on the report, but it's not ready as yet.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon Murray, Storney North. Thanks, Chair. I'm not a member of your committee. With rightly the emphasis on and focus on numeracy and literacy, I wondered if it was worthy to have a review of the numeracy and literacy policy, because I think it's been a while since that happened. Maybe worthwhile that councillors are refreshed with the policy. And as a wee aside, listening to your opening, just as you started the meeting, you mentioned Storney Primary's relationship or communication with Tianjin, which struck a chord with me, because I think that's Eric Liddell's birthplace, the famous Christian athlete. So there's quite a connection there. I hope that's been explored as well. Thanks.
It's good to know that I didn't massacre Tianjin either. So that's good.
Okay, Councillor Murray, just again, we will have a look at the numeracy and literacy policy. I think at the moment, just officer time is taken up with COVID recovery, what we've been doing. And I should also add, from October to December, we've had 10 engagements with Education Scotland in terms of 3 thematic reviews, 3 return visits from pre-COVID. We've had CLD, DYW, and we've also worked with them on Lewis Castle College and SDS inspections. So officer time's at a premium, but we'll do our very best to look at the numeracy and literacy policy as a point of priority.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Norrie MacDonald.
Thanks, Chair. Norrie MacDonald, Skeeter Row. I'm glad to see, and disappointed to see, the Library Service working with the National Library of Scotland on the newspaper digitisation project. I'm glad to see it, but I'm disappointed it's only one line. I've been banging on about this for a while. I think it's important that we maximise revenue for the Library Service. I think this is an important part of it. If we can get our local newspapers, our local historical society newspapers, our local community newspapers, with their buy-in digitised and for folk to be able to access them online, I think it's a great idea. I would just like to be kept in the loop, you know, if we can get a regular update on where we are with this. I think the local Stornoway Gazette was certainly interested in giving us access to a digitisation format, or letting us get the current gazettes online before they deteriorate any further, because I'm sure the older ones are probably getting to the stage where, unless they're digitised soon, they're probably atrophy to dust. So I think it's important we move quickly on this, and yeah, it'd be good to get an update on where we are going forward. So I'm glad to see it's here, and I'm hoping it will progress quickly from now on.
Yeah, noted. Thanks for that. Councillor Crichton.
Thank you, Chairman. Just with reference to 10.2 and the Scottish Government's plans to establish a national digital school, and obviously they've taken the idea from the prototype we've developed ourselves in eSchool. I just asking, you know, how far have those discussions gone, and you know, as long, you know, I'd welcome the establishment of a national school, but as long as it isn't at the expense of what we've invested in and developed ourselves, which has been a huge success over the last number of years.
Again, I agree with everything you say. I think the establishment of a national digital school is taking a bit longer, I think, than was anticipated. There were two boards running concurrently, and the National e-Learning and also on the eSchool itself. Now that's bringing the two boards together into one board, looking at just the National Digital School, which eSchool will very hopefully be part of. So we're just waiting further information on that. And I agree, I think eSchool, the live interactive learning that they provided us incredibly positive feedback from young people. That's what they want, but we have to be careful that other bigger authorities won't try and swallow us up.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor McCormick.
Thank you very much, Chair. Listening to all that the Director of Education has said, and I am, of course, conscious of what has happened in the past in terms of staffing in your department. I wonder whether you perhaps require a further senior member of staff in your department to support the work.
Staff in the department are working incredible hours, and you know, I'm incredibly grateful to them, and I think schools appreciate the work that they are doing, but sometimes they go beyond the limit on every day, if I'm being honest with you. And we've taken Alistair Brown. I'll provide a separate report, ex-Education Scotland. He was the head of 6-year schools in on a 2-day week at the moment to support our secondary school agenda, because we felt there was a gap there and we weren't supporting the secondary agenda as we should. So Alistair's visited all 4 of the schools. He's working with them on an improvement agenda that I supported Donald and Mary Claire, but we will look as things are developing, and we're also, as we come to a further report, the education reform is going to have major repercussions for all those schools, I think. So it's a work in progress, and we will have to look at staff in the centre and just what we're asking of them. So noted.
Thanks, Angus. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you. Ray Mackenzie, Stornoway South. Yeah, going back to 6.8, I think that's excellent, and I'm sure it's been said. I assume it's been said already that the Scottish Government has expanded the provision of 3 school meals from August, and it now applies to primary 1 to 4. I think that's fantastic. But the point I was going to raise actually was following on what Councillor MacDonald was saying, which is great that the digitisation project is going ahead. But what I would really like to ask is that there was, I think the establishment of the library service was 21 or thereabouts, and it was reduced, or it has been reduced to 14 or something. Now, I don't know if that's the exact, maybe one out, But could you tell me what the situation now with regards to the library service, which is obviously 1/3 down?
At the moment, it's a challenge to keep libraries open and to staff them, as you say, with a cut-in staff. The libraries have just come into the department, and it was referred to previously. We're waiting for the librarian, senior librarian, to produce this report. And once we have that report, we'll look at ways in which we can move forward. Obviously, libraries are very different now, I think. So it's the services that we provide from libraries that we need to look at to get a bigger footfall, I think, into libraries. And we can look at staffing them in different ways. And I know I've spoken with a librarian, for instance, about apprenticeships. At the moment, such a thing doesn't exist. But it will be a good way of ensuring the future of libraries if we were able to employ a few apprentices. But it's just a work in progress, if I'm honest, and it's definitely something that we'll be looking at as we move forward.
So, Chairman, it's basically still 14 at the moment.
It's about
the report
14.
comes out.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
And Councillor McLean.
Yeah, thanks again. It's coming back to what Mr. McCormack has asked about staffing within the central office. I mean, to say within the department itself. And you say you've employed an ex-head teacher there for a 0.4. I think it's for 2 days a week. How do you see the role of executive head teacher? Do you see that role being the individuals being centralised within Stornoway, which for me would be the right place for them to be, so that they could actually work from there? Because I know some schools are finding that maybe when they're in one school, that they're more within that school rather than being centralised and then being able to spread themselves out better. Is that one of your ambitions, I should say? I don't know if I would call it an ambition, to see them in a central position.
The executive heads, again, I would hope that, I think the way the world is evolving and working in terms of remote working, etc., I think a lot of their work can be done very effectively from wherever they are. For instance, I think the Euston Barra model or the youth model works very well. I think the Broadway model will work well. I think the rural Lewis is probably more challenging because of the landscape, etc. But we will look at bases for them, not necessarily Stornoway, but just wherever they are. I think we could find office space for them, because I think it's about the effectiveness of the work rather than the location, and also the work that we give them. But it's they're still in early stages, really, and we'll work on that one and look just what best practice, what it tells us, and we'll ask schools as well how it's working in terms of the support for them.
So my follow-on from that is that, do you see a role for an executive head teacher for the secondary sector, that is, which seems to be missing? If you got somebody in for two days, he's only acting there for 2 days. So because, as you say, there's a bit of a missing cog in that wheel there.
The terminology is
yeah, absolutely.
Secondly, I think it's the role that's hugely important, and we've had a gap for our 4 secondary schools for the last couple of years. Just we simply haven't had the manpower to look at statistical packs and looking at performance in our secondary schools. And Mr. Brown, who was our link officer for Education Scotland, is now starting on that work, and we've got the statistical packs coming, and we'll take reports to future committees just to show how we're looking at performance in secondary schools. But there's been a definite gap there.
Thanks very much. No members online with questions? Okay. Do members agree to the recommendation at 3.1? Great, thank you. Children's Services, the item 4 will be considered in private at the end of the meeting, so we'll move on to item 5, and that's educational provision. This report provides an update to the Comhairle about the continuing impact of COVID-19 on delivery of education service and actions being taken to reduce risk of virus transmission in schools and maintain services. Donald MacLeod is available to speak to the report and answer any questions. Donald.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this report is the latest in a series of reports that we've presented to Councillors at this committee in terms of keeping everyone informed of the work that's ongoing since the onset of the pandemic within our education system. All the reports prior to this one have very much focused on the procedural steps that have been taken to keep services running and to comply with the Scottish Government guidelines on the safe operation of schools. This report does that, but also it does so in a context that recognises the significant challenge that our system has been under since the schools returned in August, where prior to August in the previous academic session, we were operating with ultimately very small numbers of confirmed COVID-19 cases. Since returning from the summer holidays and in the first term in August and through the course of this term, our schools have faced unprecedented challenge in terms of the number of COVID-19 cases, and that a reflection of that wider challenge that our community has faced. There is detail in the report in paragraph 6.1 that gives information to members about the prevalence of cases that we've seen in schools. In the first term, there were a total of 84 cases across our school population, including staff and pupils. That's increased considerably. We've had significant rise since returning from the October holiday period. At the time of writing, there were 123 cases this term. That's now increased as of today to 203, making it 287 cases so far since the pupils returned to school this session. And that now affects 19 of our 22 schools. So it speaks of the challenge that's been across our system, affecting just about every community in the Western Isles and almost every school in the Western Isles in the last few months. And the challenges that our staff have faced in trying to maintain services in that context. I think it's testament to our frontline staff working in our schools and nursery settings that we have endeavoured at every step to maintain services for our communities. We have had to recognise a couple of short-term and small closures of early years provisions at Uig School and Surrey Scott School. But other than that, we've been able to maintain services throughout. And this is in the context of where we do a weekly census of staff absence for Scottish Government. That's in the peak of this current outbreak in late October, November. We were 35 staff short, 35 staff out and isolating at home, either awaiting testing or having tested positive. So that's testament to the strain that the system is under at the moment, but also in recognition of the sterling work that staff are doing to make sure that our schools continue to operate and provide the essential services to our community. There are currently 6 schools that have active cases at the moment, and 1 school where that is at a sufficient level to be considered an outbreak. The report goes on to explain that in the context of the high number of cases that we've had, a number of our schools have had to increase their risk assessment measures back to levels that were in place previously. The national guidance for the safe operation of schools is a minimum guidance, and schools and head teachers, as the responsible people for risk assessment, are able to make local decisions to increase measures to make sure that the schools can operate as safely as possible, and we support them in doing that. We're also working in daily contact with the NHS Health Protection team to liaise with them about the patterns of infection and transmission and the steps and additional steps that are needing to be taken to control and stem outbreaks. We were in late October, November, seeing an average of about 12 cases per day in schools, and in working with school staff, we increased measures, and particularly in relation to advising parents to keep ill children at home. That had a positive impact on the spread of transmission and reduced that for a period of time through the middle of November to around about 2 to 3 cases per day. But we are seeing at the moment, over the last week, an increase to about 4 cases per day, 4 to 5 cases per day at the moment across our school estate. Also in 6.6, it recognises that this is having an impact on attendance across our schools. Inevitably, that is a requirement. Children who are testing positive or who are isolating or who are ill and can't attend, obviously that does impact on attendance. And as was mentioned in item 3 on the agenda, that does mean that we're not able to focus on typical business performance or improving attainment when there's such a significant impact of COVID-19. I would also want to recognise that there's significant work being done by our schools to support the families that are affected by issues of not being able to attend, and whilst also supporting the children who are able to come to school every day, they are working hard to support the children that can't be. The amount of absences, the duration of absences is considerably less than when we were in the lockdown period, where children are typically out of school for approximately 5 to 12 calendar days, but they are still been supported in terms of maintaining their learning in that time. And finally, I would just want to draw attention to the significant work that was done over the summer holiday and the October school holiday to support particularly vulnerable young people in our community, but also a wider audience as well. Through funding that we received from Scottish Government for the Get Into Summer programme, we were able to partner up with CLD, our Pupil Equity Fund staff, and a significant contribution of resources and staff from Sport and Health team to run a programme over the summer to support young people. And there was a slightly more limited programme for vulnerable pupils over the October holiday as well. So I'd be happy to take any questions on that update report.
Thank you, Don. Yeah, I echo those comments about the summer activities and October breaks are really useful for the children and young people. I'll come to Councillor Murray in a second. Just in terms of the pandemic, it's been difficult. I mean, the stuff we went through with the lockdowns, I think we handled it really well. The fact that we had eSchool in place really helped us, but the work put in by the staff, I mean, it got us through that. This last term has been difficult for a whole variety of different reasons, and the fact that it's actually in the schools, we haven't really had that throughout the pandemic. So again, the response and actions by the staff and the teachers and everyone involved has been amazing to keep services going and to keep our children educated. So just want to say a thank you to everyone involved in that. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not a member of the committee. I'd just like to reiterate what you just said there about thanking the staff and the teachers and maintaining a high level of professionalism over this time. Not only do they have a fear of their own safety, but they've been almost hampered with absences and children having to catch up on that, and they've done remarkably well. I know that from my own experience. So from the group, we'd like to really issue our thanks to the teachers and the schools and your staff in your own department, trying to address a very, very difficult and challenging situation. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Any other comments or questions from members? Councillor Mackay.
Yeah, Roddy Mackay, Benbecula and North East. Yeah, I'd just like to reiterate the comments of yourselves. The job that the teachers have done in the face of this pandemic has been absolutely superb. But one thing that has been brought to attention and may also be having an impact on attendance is the conditions in classrooms where windows have to be kept open and children are cold and being asked to remove their jackets. Is that something that we could possibly look at to make sure that that children are allowed to keep their jackets on should they want to keep them on, to make sure that we don't then have another consequence with colds and everything else that could also have an impact on attendance?
Certainly, that sounds like a common sense approach to me, and we'll speak with the schools and take that one forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the maintenance of high levels of ventilation are a requirement of reducing the risk in schools, and obviously as we come into the winter months in the Western Isles, that can be challenging in terms of the weather and particularly affects some schools depending on their geographical aspect and exposure to particular weather. But we certainly be working with schools to make sure that children are as comfortable as possible in terms of other things that we can do to support that, with additional clothing, adjustments to heating, and the use of particular spaces to try and reduce these risks. We went through the winter 2020 with similar measures in place and were able to support families well to do that, and we'll continue to do so. And we'll take on board Councillor Mackay's suggestion as well.
Thanks, Donald. Councillor Mackay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just on the issues that are challenging to the teachers, we really should think highly of them. We've heard this phrase above and beyond about so many different cohorts throughout this pandemic, but teachers really have gone above and beyond. They do not have the luxury of being able to, and I say luxury advisedly, of being able to work at home and do their work from the comfort of their own home. They have to go into schools, they have to put themselves at risk, I suppose, because they're engaging with others, which they seem very committed to do, but they do have this. My namesake Roddy mentioned the open windows. I think the teachers themselves would like to be leaving their jackets on. So their working conditions are challenging. They're challenging anyway. It's not that easy being a primary school teacher in this day and age, so it's really challenging for them. And the one plea I would make is that further down the line, that when we reflect on attainment, let's remember what they've come through and what they've had to cope with. and treat them accordingly when we get results around attainment, because they have really gone above and beyond, literally, and well done to them.
Great, thanks for that, Roy. No other questions or comments? No. Okay. Do members agree to the recommendation at 3.1? Sorry, Nori, were you want to come in?
No, I was just going to say, I have no idea how you manage with the ever-changing guidelines with COVID and how you've managed to keep schools open and running and educating our kids. And I think it's reiterating what the leader said. It's a fantastic achievement. It's a biggest belief that we've got so many folk, so many teachers, so many schools, so many different changing regulations and guidelines, and being able to operate and educate our kids. I think the thanks of this whole committee should go out to the whole department and to our teachers in particular, to parent councils and everybody who supports our schools and our kids. Well done.
Yeah, thanks, Nori. Okay, do members agree to recommendation at 3.1? Agreed, thank you. Agenda item 6, this report seeks approval from the Comhairle to begin the preliminary phase 1 of a statutory consultation on the closure of Tolsta School. Donald MacLeod is available to speak to the report and answer any questions.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this report brings forward information and seeking of the approval of the Comhairle to authorise the Director of Education, Skills and Children's Services to begin that preliminary phase of the statutory consultation around Tolsta School. This is under the Schools Consultation Scotland Act 2010. As has been presented to the committee previously during the process, the school in Tolsta mothballed in 2019 and has been subsequently agreed to be continually mothballed on an annual review from that date, and was last agreed to be mothballed at the sitting of this committee in June 2021. It's within the statutory guidance of the Act that a school should not typically be under a mothballed status for more than 3 years without providing the community an opportunity for consultation about closure. And that is to avoid the possibility of schools sitting long-term in a mothballed status with effectively creating a closure by default. So there's a requirement on education authorities to move towards a consultation on closure when a school has had the status of mothballing for approximately 3 years. There can be some exceptions to this, and an example would be where, for instance, we have schools that are partially mothballed, where some of that provision is open. But Tolsta School has been fully closed and mothballed since June 2019. So in terms of a requirement to meet the conditions of the Act, the report seeks the approval of the committee to begin the preliminary phase of the consultation. The requirement for this is that a preliminary phase is provided because of the status of Tolsta School as a rural school, and under the Act that gives additional provisions that the education authority is required to meet prior to consultation, and we are seeking the approval of the committee today to allow that to progress, for us to conduct the steps that are required in that preliminary process and take a report back to committee to seek the embarkment of the consultation once that is completed. Happy to take any questions from members on that.
Donald. Councillor Crichton.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, it's very sad that this report is before us, but it's inevitable that the consultation period has arrived and it has to be triggered because of the following timetable. But we would hope that in the future that this building can be used and serve the community in some other capacity, in some shape and form in the future. And as local members, we've agreed to seek a meeting with the Director of Education to discuss further the future of educational provision in the Wakatu area, establishing a vision for that to ensure the best education is delivered in the best setting. So we can push to organise a meeting with the Director.
Thank you, Councillor Crichton. Yeah, the Director agrees. Councillor McLean.
Thanks, thanks, Chair. I endorse exactly what Councillor Crichton has said, and look forward to meeting the Director on that. It was the custom, the prior custom in this authority that some of us go back quite a wee bit of time, that when you closed a school, that the receiving school was to benefit in some way or other by resources or finance being made available for different elements of education. And I'm just saying that maybe we should put that sort of caveat into the consultation, that we will, that in other words, back is the receiving school. So there have been a number of pupils that are coming from Tulsa, so that therefore there should be some improvements or other made to it. We're not, I'm sure councillors, my local councillors will agree with me on that. We're not looking for 1.8 million, but we're talking, aren't we? Well, I'll defer to my senior colleague and say that, but something in the region that we should be looking for, but in a serious context, we should be looking at enhancing some of the resources within the receiving school. So I'm just putting that in as a
Thanks, Callum. Councillor Leader.
I'm sure Councillor McLean would agree that the back score is greatly enhanced by the fact Tulsa pupils are now going there. That's a bonus.
Thank you, Leader. Norrie.
Yeah. Sorry.
Are you Norrie?
No, I was just going to say maybe instead of the Tulsa Community Development Turbine handing out co-op vouchers, they could maybe give 10 grand for every new child born in Tulsa. Might provide some stimulus to reopen the school.
I couldn't
If there were
possibly
young enough parents to manage that, it'd be good.
Councillor McKeever.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not a member of the committee. Johnny McKeever, Lochatua. Can I say that I've had no representations against this proposal from any parents when this was agreed to be mothballed back in 2019. However, I am concerned about assurances that were given to preschool provision, because that closed before 2019. We had no provision in Tulsa since 2017, I think it's still. And the parents were given assurances that their children would be transferred to back. And it says in 5.2 here that nursery and primary age are designated to attend back schools and transport provided. We're now in a situation where preschool kids are not being given transport. Why did that assurance not, why was it not fulfilled? Thank you.
Okay, Director.
It's something we'll take away with that. Have a look at that. That's an answer.
Yeah, absolutely. We explore that, and part of this and the protection that's there for Tulsa School and its community in terms of the Act is to allow for consultation to happen, for these matters to be discussed, and for interim, but ultimately interim mothballing situations not to run and run and run. So that's hopefully will allow, should the Comhairle decide to support the recommendation, will allow the consultation to happen that will facilitate that discussion with the community, and as other members have spoken of today, explore some of the other implications for the receiving school and the catchment across the Lochatua area, which would be within the scope of a potential future consultation.
Thank you, Donald. Happy with that, yeah. Okay, thank you. Do no other questions or comments?
Just one point.
Councillor Mackenzie, yeah.
With regard to what Mr. McLean, Councillor McLean has said, I quite agree with him, and I hope that will be followed up, as he has said. All I would say is remember Sandwick Hill. As Mr. McCormack pointed out in years gone by, the money didn't go to Stornoway Primary. Thank you.
Thank you. Do members agree to recommendation at 3.1? Agreed. Thank you. Next up is item 7, and this report provides an update to the Comhairle about the development of a new sports facility at Stornoway Primary School and to seek in principle approval for the progression of the development. And before I take any questions or comments, I just want to say thank you to the officers for getting this report, as I know it's been quite a quick turnaround and time scale, so across all departments and within the Comhairle to get this report to us today. So before we just want to say that before we went any further. So Donald, available to speak with the report.
Okay, yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, this report comes forward today based on the decision of the previous committee sitting in September that requested that a report bring forward design, costing and financial package to allow the project to be supported and being approved and going forward. And significant amount of work has been done in a relatively short amount of time, as the Chair has recognised there, in terms of trying to progress this. The Comhairle has been committed to trying to progress this in collaboration with the stakeholders that are involved in the project, the Comhairle itself, the school, its pupils and parent council. And as was intimated in previous reports, a steering group was established to try and do that. The steering group has worked through with its various stakeholders to a specification for what the various members of the steering group were seeking from such a development, and colleagues in Assets, Finance and Resources took that specification forward into what was provided in the appendices to the report in terms of a feasibility study that explores one potential design option, which is a traditional build sports hall physically adjacent and connected to the school. As part of our consultation around that, and in recent meetings with particularly the Stornoway Primary Parent Council, there continues to be views that this isn't the exact design that people wish to take forward, and that's been respected, and work will continue in dialogue with that. I would note that there's been a very little amount of time from the sitting of the September committee to the date that this report had to be prepared and submitted for today's committee, and that hasn't allowed a great deal of consultation time to be able to be had. But we have had some significant discussions with Parent Council around this, and have a number of different ideas that we want to take forward with them and other stakeholders, with the predominant wish that the facility that is developed meets the needs of the school and its children and young people. In light of that, the feasibility study recognises that an investment of approximately 1.6 to 1.8 million would need to be considered in terms of trying to achieve this project. And within that, there is a view that the exact design can be accommodated and evolved. So the report seeks two recommendations of the Comhairle today, which is to approve in principle the design costs and finance package up to a maximum construction cost of 1.8 million, with consideration that that design needs significant further evolution. And secondly, to provide authority to the Director of Education, Skills and Children's Services, the Head of Property and Infrastructure and the Head of Accountancy and Exchequer Services to work with these stakeholders to conclude that design process and ensure that the project is deliverable within an agreed financial envelope. The report goes on to explain the process that's been gone through in the design development and the work that's been undertaken by the steering group to try and progress that. And it's been operating in a challenging climate in terms of differing views within the steering group about how the project should specifically progress, but has worked through towards that feasibility study that presents one design solution that would meet some of the aspirations. But there are recognitions that within that there's a particularly different design that's being considered around more of a steel construction with a canvas cover, similar to a development that's undertaken in Shetland and fairly similar to construction that's taken place at Back Development Club, but with a strong intention that it maintain the particular elements that were spoken about in the previous sitting of the committee about a multi-use surface that allows for the maximum potential use for different reasons and different purposes for the school itself. So we continue to engage with the Parents' Council, with the school, with its pupils and staff to try and evolve that design on through the steering group. We agreed at a recent meeting with the Parent Council to double the membership of parents on the steering group. I continue to have a commitment to consult with them on that. The report goes on to explain that there's, based on the feasibility study, that you do have that maximum development cost of 1.8 million. We know from preliminary work that was done for the September sitting of the committee that a covered arena type construction would be in the region of about 1.5 million. So we're in the ballpark of that development cost. And I'm happy to get any questions from members in relation to the report or its appendices.
Thank you, Donald. Any questions from members? Councillor McKenzie.
Yeah, Ray McKenzie, Stornoway South. I'd be happy to move the recommendations with slight alterations. And in fact, under 3.1a, that we do not include the word design, obviously, from what has been said, but that the rest of the things can stand. And on B, now I'm not sure who the stakeholders mentioned in here are. I know Donald touched on them, but that they should include the Stornoway Parents Council subgroup as well, because that was the view of the Parents Council. So I don't know if that's covers the thing, but basically the rest of it would stand.
Thank you, Ray. Donald, could you just give us an update on the stakeholder membership?
Absolutely. First of all, acknowledge absolutely that the design is an evolution, and would understand the wish of the council to remove the word design from the initial recommendation at 3.1a. In terms of 3.1b and the reference to stakeholders, the stakeholders identified in the steering group are the Education, Skills and Children's Services Department, representation within that of Sport and Health, the Assets, Finance and Resources Department through technical colleagues, architects and for design, and the head teacher of the school and senior manager of the school representing the views of pupils, and also parents through the subgroup, the Building Facilities subgroup of the Parent Council, who had one member on it, with the intention of providing back and forth dialogue with the wider Parent Council. We agreed at a recent meeting to double that membership of that group, so that there's 2 members of the facility subgroup of the Stornoway Primary Parent Council on the steering group for the project. And there is a continuing commitment for us to engage beyond that specific involvement to regular engagement with that group of the Parent Council, but also in recognition as well that there are multiple stakeholders to the project, and every stakeholder has to have their opportunity to contribute and to give views on the project, and try and work with a common goal of trying to achieve the facility that best meets the totality of the needs of the school and its pupil population.
Chairman, I'm just a bit concerned that among the stakeholders that the parents' views will not be swamped. You know, I mean, 2 sounds okay up to a point, but I hope that, you know, they get a full chance of putting forward their own views about the thing. And the other point, I think it wouldn't do any harm. Certainly, I know it happens in other projects that maybe, I know this is in Stornoway North in theory, although the whole of Stornoway is affected, and other parts outside Stornoway, that maybe a councillor from each of the 2 wards might also be on that body, if that's of interest.
There are too many lights on.
It was something we'd have to consider with the membership of the steering group. I think the steering group has tried to maintain a balance of all stakeholders, and I would be cautious of trying to maintain a reasonable balance of each stakeholder to have equal representation. And I think 2 parents within that group is a reasonably good balance of the overall views. And I hope the parent who's already been engaged with that steering group and the new parent who's joining it will also feel that their views are considered. We are operating in an environment where we do want this facility to be what the whole school population wants, and parents are a view within that, and that is being taken on board. If the committee feels that it wishes to have elected members as part of that steering group as well, then we would accommodate that if it's felt appropriate that takes place.
Thanks, Ron. Can you put your microphone off, Donald, so you can come in?
Thank you. Just to say, basically, from the last committee meeting, I think we're almost there in terms of officers agreeing with the steering group what the facility basically is. You know, it's a covered one that meets the needs of the school in terms of sport assemblies, concerts, and other school events. So I think we're almost there. I think the steering group is almost there as well, but we can take some comments, but I think the steering group sets itself. And I think we are in agreement with the 3 parent council members that we've met on a number of occasions now and been an email exchange with them. So I think it's basically just that we have a bit of a focus on this following on to today's meeting and get this project over the line, because I think we're almost there.
Thank you, Leader.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, I agree. I think it is almost there, and it looks like we're getting a really good outcome for the school. I don't think we need to put members on or anybody else on. We need to build a bigger hall just for all the people on the committee if we carry on at this rate. I think it needs to be tight. It's achieved a lot already. So let's as William has just said, let's let them complete. And I know Ray's observation about members, but members are going to get feedback at every committee meeting, at every MOUG, and so we have an involvement in that sense. So I would rather let them crack on with it. They've done good progress, and we look forward to seeing them coming up with something that is a real flagship property for the school and an asset.
Based on what Ray was saying, one of the suggestions was making sure the parents aren't railroaded. It's got that kind of impression. So I think communication is going to be key for the next stage. So I think if we have that kind of commitment, that's going to happen with all the stakeholders and feeding back to members, if as and when we take going through the different stages. I think that would be. I don't know if we need to put a member on the steering group at this stage.
Well, I'm quite happy with that, actually, what the leader said. And I just think after 20 years of campaigning and everything that, and I wouldn't go over any more arguments, but I'm just encouraged that there now seems to be a sympathetic and enlightened view towards this, and I look forward to seeing the results.
Thank you. Councillor McCormick.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've had conversations with the chair of the Parent Council, and they seem very happy with how things have gone recently. They're very pleased with the progress that's been made, and what we're ending up with is something that the parents and the staff really want. We've never really had a firm idea about exactly what that was, but we now seem to know exactly what that is, and I wouldn't like there to be any delays in this now. I'd like us to progress it as quickly as we possibly can.
Thanks. Noddy.
Thanks again, Chair. Yeah, I'm grateful as well that this has finally come to some kind of end game. I'm also grateful that the leader threw in his own impetus behind it, and that the stakeholders, as clarified by Donald, which I was grateful for, had the sense to sit back and wait till they just decided what they wanted before going ahead. It wasn't a case of let's get bricks on the ground now because we've got something going. Let's sit back and assess what we can get for the money. So we're looking at all the options. So I'm hopeful that for the project going forward, we can deliver the best, biggest, covered, insulated sporting facility, because we remember this is a sporting facility primarily, I think, as well as other activities you can always shove anything you want into a games hall. But the biggest, best insulated covered facility we can get for 1.8 million. Look at all the options and deliver the best that we can for the school kids of Stornoway Primary, because they've lagged behind the Scotland Ura schools when it comes to sporting facilities primarily. And it would be great to see this up and running and great to see the project underway.
Thanks, Noddy. Donald, will you like to come back in?
It was just to clarify the previous comments in relation to the Parent Council membership. We've been in consultation with the Parent Council representative of the steering group, and the clear understanding that that is part of the overall consultation process with the parents' facilities group. They are a two-way conduit for us for that steering group. They represent the wider views of parents in that forum, but they also feed back from the steering group to that group. And we've made commitments and given assurances that we will continue in dialogue and attend any meeting that any Parent Council group wish to hold, to engage with them in the discussion, and will actively do so and proactively do so as well as we move through this process. And I think it has been acknowledged that we've made significant headway. We have other work that we need to do to refine and develop the design, which everyone is open to doing. But we do have to just hold on to the fact that we need to make sure the voices of all the stakeholders within the group are heard. And an example of that being that the school itself very predominantly wished the design to incorporate a physical link to the existing school. And to be fair to what's in the feasibility study, that was one of the things that was brought through that affected that design process. So we need time to work with the steering group for the views of all the different stakeholders to be heard in that meeting, and for that to be considered in an achievable design context, and also to recognise the compromises that may have to be made across all of that to achieve, as Councillor MacDonald has identified, the best possible facility at the best possible scale for if we're able to consider the recommendation today of an up to 1.8 million development.
Thank you, Donald. Councillor McLean.
Yeah, Chair, for somebody out, I'm an outsider here, and we have to go with the feelings of the Stornoway councillors, really, and that's what we're going for. But I'm a bit confused here. Officers were given a steer, and we've got a design in front of us. Have we now come to the stage that the parents don't want that design? That's correct. I'm seeing a nod from Mr. Mackenzie. So they don't want that design. Seems to be an awful lot of time and waste that officers have done this design, and yet we kind of at this stage say we don't want this. And I'm not going to say was there enough consultation or whatever, but that's between the Stornoway councillors and the parent council. So what we've got here is there's going to be another design. Am I correct? There's another design which is not here, but which you've agreed on 1.8 million. Am I right?
Donald, I can come to the director.
Sorry, Director. Sorry,
That's okay. Donald's been involved mostly, but technical services, were asked to give us a scope really, and they worked very quickly to come up with this design. And I think when we discussed with parents, they want a bigger floor space in terms of the money being invested. And we are having a look at alternatives, and we'll have to discuss that with technical services colleagues, because we've looked at a building in Shetland, for instance, that's been put up for less money. Whether it can fit into the Stornoway primary facility, I'm not sure, but it looks a very attractive design. It gives a much bigger floor space. So that's something we're working on, and it's just that the time scale that technical services are worked to it, basically 8 weeks since the last meeting. They've produced something very detailed, but I think the parents are looking for more floor space within the facility that's developed.
Yeah. Personally, I think that this is our biggest primary school in the whole of the Western Isles, and I do think that we should have the best of resources there for them. And I fully support that if the parents are looking for a little bit more, then we should go for that, but go for, as Councillor MacDonald was saying, the best we can get for the price, within the price limits of that. So I think it's a straightforward. From a confused point of view, there's more. This confusion is dimming away. Thanks, Cal.
Can I just come in there? There isn't really too much confusion. All we're doing is tweaking and tweaking and tweaking until we get to what we want, which is it's a good way to be. We're evolving, we're listening, we're going back, and none of the work that has been done to date is a waste. It has all been discussed, improved, adapted, and we'll get there in the end. And we're, as the director has just said, even late in the day, we've come across some potential, which will give you, as Councillor MacDonald said, more for the amount of money we're spending. So yeah, we're just about there. So let's leave them to get on with it, and hopefully we'll have it all settled in due course and ready to start building. And then we can go along and cut a ribbon someday, Ray.
Don, will you want to come in?
It was just to try and provide some clarity to Councillor McLean's question. Part of the issue that we've had is the tight turnaround from the September series to the deadline of report submission for this series, which really was only a matter of weeks ultimately. And it's a rare project indeed that ends up getting built on the first design that's ever drawn on it. And we are, because of the reporting cycles for this particular development, it's coming maybe prior to that evolution of the design being able to be fully completed. The design and the feasibility study was borne out, as I mentioned in my initial discussion, from the work of the steering group. And whilst that included the views of parents, it also very importantly included the views of the school. And the school, as I mentioned, were very keen to have a strong an actual physical link to the existing building, and were looking for certain particular amenities out of the design. The views of parents have come through to us very strongly that they feel that is not a sufficient size of building, and that's been absolutely respected and taken on board. The other factor in this is that, without doubt, in the last 6 to 12 months, there's been very significant increase in construction costs. And that has hampered the scale of what was able to be achieved in that, what some have perceived to be a fairly modest design, through the traditional build costs, build construction approach, which is why now we're looking at exploring different options for different kinds of construction, as the director mentioned, a project in Shetland and also a project within our own island in terms of the back development project that might allow a different kind of design to be taken. But it's also trying to respect and be fair to the fact that the school had to presented views through that steering group of things they wanted to achieve in it too, which were incorporated in that affected that design. But the design process is an evolution that we're working through, and if we're able to give some time for that to happen and to have everybody's views taken into account in it, it will move forward to a design that everybody will support.
Thank you. And Councillor Mackenzie, and then I'll close.
And yes, well, the first 3.1a, we're taking out the word design, and that's meets everybody's satisfaction. As far as the second one's concerned, it says the authority is granted to the Director of Education, the Head of Property, and the Head of Accountancy to oversee and approve the final design proposals following consultation with stakeholders on condition of the final proposals being within the financial envelope. And the longer it takes, of course, the harder it's going to meet that 1.8 million. But the point is, the Parents Council, they've said they don't want a one badminton court hall. That's not what it's required. They want the original one that was proposed, and I think that has to come from them, and then these different aspects of the council can come together, having established that it's a decent sized court, whatever it was, 2,400 square metres. Thank you.
Agreed.
Thank you. Yeah, so based on your earlier comment, I don't think there's any problem in taking the word design out, because it's a process that we're going through anyway. So if the committee's happy, yeah. So I'll agree to the recommendation at 3.1 with that change then. Yeah. Okay, thank you, members. Agenda item 8. This report provides information on the OECD reports on the Curriculum for Excellence and Upper Secondary Education Student Assessment. The Director for Education, Schools and Children's Services is available to speak to the report and answer any questions. William?
Thank you, Chairs. This really is just to update you as regards the OECD report and CFE, and also their second subsequent report and assessment. So the 12 recommendations that were made by the OECD were accepted by Scottish Government, and these form part of the journey moving forward. And as a consequence, Government appointed Professor Ken Muir to chair the Education Reform Group with an extremely challenging task of completing this report by the end of December. I think we'll probably ask for an extension of that timeline to finish this report. Consultation closed last Friday. I think the main driver in terms of the report is senior phase and qualifications. It will see a reform of Education Scotland and SQA. So I think that they will move away from the one exam determine where people will go. So the exam structure will change, and really rather than go through the detail is there in the report, and I'm happy to take questions on it.
Thanks, William. Any questions or comments from members? No, and nothing online. Thanks, William. Do members agree with the recommendation at 3.1? Agreed. Thank you. Agenda item 9. This report is to inform members of the work of the Sports Development Service over the period August 2020 to July 2021. Ian Gigi Campbell is available to speak to the report and answer any questions. Gigi, are you there?
I am here. I am.
There you go.
Or not. Hi.
You brought some friends
thanks,
with you.
Chair. Yes.
Thanks,
yeah, this report, it's our annual newsletter, and it just highlights the work of the team, the Sport and Health Sports Development team over the last year. This illustrates the wide range of opportunities that we've supported and the team have provided. So it speaks for itself. The staff have stayed very positive, just to get a word in for them through COVID. Delighted with how they've dealt with all the circumstances that have been thrown at them, and the partnerships that they've developed has been very positive through this period as well, and will no doubt help them moving forward. The continued emphasis on outdoor activities, and we've been very lucky with our outdoor learning management team of Izzy Oakley and Tim Pickering, who've been working with SAPO and directing the Scottish Government and guiding them with their guidance through COVID for outdoor activities. So that's benefited not just our staff, but education staff throughout the Western Isles. Happy to take any questions, but as I say, it's just nice to see happy faces in that newsletter when we produce it every year.
Thanks, Gigi. Any questions or comments from members? Yeah, Councillor Mackenzie.
Could I ask Gigi if that's him bouncing down the cliff on the end of a rope?
Oh, probably. Action man. Action man.
Excellent, thanks, Gigi. And I think going back to the good news stories at the start of the day, I mean, there's an awful lot happening with the sport in their islands, and the youngsters are getting recognition nationwide with what they're doing. So I think it's a testament to the work that's been done in this department. Thanks for that. Do members agree to the recommendation at 3.1? Agreed. Thank you. Agenda item 10. This report seeks approval for continued financial support for the Lewis and Harris and Uist-Umbara local sports councils. Ian Gigi Campbell is available to speak to the report and answer any questions. Gigi?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Yes, the sports councils are seeking further devolved funding of 13,000 for the Lewis and Harris Sports Council and 8.5 for the Uist-Umbara Sports Council to help them support our clubs. Lewis and Harris has over 70 clubs and associations in its membership, and Uist-Umbara has over 30, approaching 40. They've adapted to COVID as well. There obviously hasn't been so much activity going on with competition and training camps sort of cancelled. But they supported the members through COVID with COVID grants, free membership, advice and risk assessments through my own team as well. In recent months, there's been very high demand, extraordinarily high demand from both sports councils for funding, which is really encouraging. And although they were sitting on healthy budgets, that's going down very quickly. There's a lot been allocated, and they've also been able to increase the amount of grant percentage that they can provide, which had been reduced due to pressure on their finances in fairly recent years. So all very positive, and we're also hopeful that if we get access to Crown Estate money again, that our Transocean Fund for young people will also be able to be topped up in the future. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks for that, Councillor MacDonald.
Thanks again, Chair. Thanks, Gigi, for the report previously. You can't underestimate the value of the funding that this gives our athletes to get to the mainland to compete at a higher level, and the way it's brought their development forward. That was highlighted in the beginning of your own statement at the beginning of this committee, with the progress being made by our athletes when it comes to their achievements. Travel on and off the islands has always been a problem for our athletes, but now, as I've highlighted before, they don't just think of a trip to the mainland as a trip and a jolly to get to the mainland to participate. They think of it as a trip now to go and, for want of a phrase, kick ass, win medals and progress. They're not going there anymore thinking they're making up the numbers. They're going there to defend titles and to win things. My reason for bringing this up is I was grateful, in conjunction with Robert Emmett, a couple of years ago, to get the Transocean Fund replenished through the top slicing of the Crown Estate for 22.5k. I noticed that sports councils have applied for 21.5k. I would be grateful maybe if we give them an extra £500 each, because we've already promised 22.5k from the Crown Estate. I think maybe it's just a slight underestimate on our part, Gigi, maybe. We've committed to 22.5k.
Sorry. Thank you, Councillor. There are two separate funds. There's the devolved funding that we've requested just now, as you say, 21.5 for the two sports councils. That's covers all clubs can apply for that. The Transocean money that came through in I think it was 2015 with the disaster over in the west side, they contributed money towards the sports councils, which was drip fed through the Western Isles Development Trust through over a 3-year period. So that was additional money that was allocated specifically to young people to support their travel costs. And as that expired and ran out, was used up, we were very grateful that councillors agreed to top slicing of Crown Estate money in 2019, which was additional money of 22,000, which was allocated at that time.
Thanks, Gigi. So that was a separate, it's a separate report.
Good stuff. We'll spend it wisely.
We have, definitely. Any other questions or comments, Councillor Mackay?
Yeah, I'd just like to echo what Norrie said. I think it's really, really important that we keep supporting the young athletes. The job that Christine McQuarrie and Kevin Morrison have done in years is absolutely phenomenal, and I think it needs to they need to be recognised that they're doing such a good job. And I think it's also important that it's not just that they're leaving the island to go and compete nationally. They're also competing internationally and winning titles. We now have title holders of literally all over the world. We've got title holders in Australia and America and Germany and Ireland and Scotland. You know, it's all over the place. So I think it's very, very important that they keep supporting the sports councils insofar as we can, definitely.
Yeah, thanks very much, Rory. Yeah, and I think there's some good news today from CalMac. Was there some funding or discounts put aside for athlete travel as well? So we don't have the full detail of that yet, but it's very positive. Yeah, 50% reduction, I think it was. So thanks for that. Any other questions or comments? No. Okay. Do members agree to recommendation at 3.1? Agreed. Thank you. Performance monitoring and left is 11 reports outstanding, and that's just for noting. Any questions? No. Okay. In that case, we'll move into private to consider item 4.